to stream in. Oh well. Hi YouTube. We're live here, and we are almost live on LinkedIn.
Now, for the YouTube that popped up looked like it
Yeah,
was
I'm
for.
gonna
Okay.
change it.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yep. Hey everyone. We are back. Um, just checking. Per the usual, I always have issues with LinkedIn. YouTube is usually okay, but for whatever reason, LinkedIn just
LinkedIn
does not.
feels its feelings on things, apparently.
Yeah, it's very odd. Well, hello everyone. If you don't know me already, um, I'm Adrielle. Hi, welcome to our LinkedIn slash YouTube Live Thursdays. We've been doing these every week as part of our DEI in a Box series. I am joined today with Caren. If you don't know her, aka the professional adult, aka Baldy Einstein. And today we are going to be really exploring Karen's territory, which is product. And so I'm pretty much going to let her take it away. When I tell y'all she has notes for today, I don't think we're going to get through. I don't think we're going to get through it all for the hour. But we're going to try our best to cover as much as possible. To clarify, and I'm going to let Karen really set the tone, but to clarify, we are not talking about um, DEI itself in product in terms of like diversifying your product teams. And, you know, I'm sure well, if you haven't checked out my other content where I talked about, DEI as it relates to Canva and looking at bias within the systems and things like that. We're not talking about that today. We're talking more specifically about products that can be used to help you meet your DE&I goals and objectives. So, with that said, I am going to let Karen take it away.
Hi, my name is Karen Young. I am the owner and founder of the Professional Adults, a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultancy based in Chicago. I am also a former senior product manager and manager of product management. So this is my background. Um, and as Adriel mentioned, we are going to kind of bifurcate these a little bit today. We're going to focus on DEI products as opposed to DEI in product. That is an entirely different thread. That's an entirely different thing we can go down about how product DEI works in the product life cycle, et cetera, et cetera. If you are interested in knowing more about that vein itself, I am always happy to have those conversations. Once a product person, always a product person, no matter how much you try to get yourself out of it. So, that being said, today we are going to talk about DEI products itself. Um, First thing we're going to talk about in Adriel, please just jump in wherever, because otherwise this is something I really could talk about forever.
I
I
mean,
spent
I'm
a
gonna
lot of
let
time.
you rock today. I'm all for this. I don't use a lot of products. I mean, I have, and I know when we worked together, Karen and I, for context, we used to work together, and she
Yes.
hasn't been able to get rid of me since. Um, but when we worked
And
together, there were some tools that we used, but I myself don't use a ton of tools in my process right now. So I'm really looking forward to learning a lot from you today. So I'm gonna
so,
let
and
you go for
actually,
it.
and that's actually one of the things I want to start with. Um, it isn't necessary to use tools in your DEI process. You absolutely can have a no product or low product approach to diversity, equity, inclusion and have it be wildly successful.
Yeah.
Actually, for a lot of my clients, I like to do as few products as possible, just because the uplift is hard to do. And we'll talk about that a little bit when assessing a product itself. But I'd like to kind of get people not to use products as much. However, I fully understand, especially at the mid and enterprise level, we just kind of need some products, and especially if you don't have a solid team or you are just building that or you're looking to, scale massively, you might need a little outside help. So here's where having an external product absolutely can be beneficial. So on a lot of the work that I do, I like to make sure that I understand the theory and the practice so much that I don't need a product, but sometimes you do need that product. So why exactly would you use it? you could use products to streamline and improve your current efforts. So all the stuff that you're already doing, whether it's affinity groups, employee resource groups, initiatives, etc., you can use a product to actually help amplify that and to streamline your efforts. It also is an opportunity to leverage knowledge outside of your own view. For example, I used a number of products and things to help with things like screen readers and accessibility products, because I was not as well versed on that coming into DEI, and so using a product can help to kind of support the knowledge that you don't actually have. And finally, using products are really, really great for reinforcing in person or synchronous learning. So you bring in a consultant or you have your DEI team, you go through your initiatives, you do all of that work. It's a 6 month, 12 month process of just kind of the crucible work of it. How do you continue to maintain that work? Here's where a product could be super helpful for that. I also realize as we are doing this that I talk a lot with my hands. So my apologies if that could be distracting for folks. And literally, as we're talking, it's like, wow, Caren, you are doing a lot with the hands here. Um,
I do it
but
all the
that's
time. So, I mean, the thing that stops me is having this microphone right here because I'm like, oh, I can't swat it. So,
right.
I think it
So yeah,
drives
and
your point home personally.
it does. I don't think I would know what to do if I couldn't use my hands.
Oh.
Um, Even when doing like pure workshops, I usually have a lavalier mic instead, so I can still kind of talk. But um, so those are kind of why you would actually use a DEI product. And so before we get into some examples,
Mhm.
I think it's really important to kind of think about what you should know before you even start choosing a product.
Sure.
Um, and I know everyone loves a checklist, so I have a checklist.
Yay. We love a good checklist.
We love a good checklist. The first question is your why. Why are you looking to use this product? You know, it might be one of the answers that we talked about before, but why are you looking to do this? And is this something that can be done in house? Do you actually need a product to do this? Again, products can be super duper expensive and it can be a lot of time and effort to get it up and running. Do you actually need it? And I would add
Mm-hmm.
as a corollary to that, do you need it now? Is
Right.
it something you can maybe grow into?
And
Um,
just really quickly, as we're talking about when we say product, for just to make sure we're all aligned, we're not just talking about like an analytics tool, right? Or an assessment tool. Like my brain, when I think of DEI products, I kind of jump straight to things like Culture Amp, which I know a lot of my clients have used, and I've found a lot of value in it in terms of kind of looking at employee engagement, which is one of the many pieces of DEI. So what other products could we be talking about considering as you're kind of walking us through this checklist?
Absolutely. And when we talk about products, don't just limit it to just like desktop type software. It could be things
Okay.
like micro learning.
Mm-hmm.
It could be chat bots. It could be AI. We'll talk a little bit about AI. It could be any of those things, anything that is used as a helper to the work that you do.
Okay.
Things like Slack, that also is considered a tool.
Mm-hmm.
Things like plugins like Otter AI, Grammarly, those are all tools or products that can be used for DEI purposes. So when we talk about product, we're just talking about anything that can append onto the actual work that you're doing. So
Got it. All of the
products.
things. And I'm sure we'll talk about some of the specific tools after we go through our
Yes,
checklist. Okay, cool. Back to
yes,
the
yes,
checklist. Sorry, I just
yeah,
wanted to
yeah.
make sure
Oh no, no,
everybody had some clarity here.
no, that's super duper important, and also again making sure that we kind of frame that up is really great. That actually refers that kind of is a good call back to last week's session when we built that workshop where we
Yep,
always talked about kind of framing the conversation before you get into the conversation. So
definitely.
that's a good way of doing that. We still actually have that framework available if you wanted to learn how to build your own
Yeah,
framework of a
I'll
workshop.
drop
We
a
have
link.
that available too. Um, so why are you looking to do this? And then the next question is, does it align to your specific goals and strategies? Like, don't just get something like Culture Amp because everybody has it. What exactly are you trying to do right now? So don't get something that makes sense for you.
Yep.
The third one, and I think that this is one that a lot of people kind of overlook. What exactly does the product do?
Mm.
you're a lot of people will grab something like Workday or grab something super huge like that. Do you actually know what it does? If you're going to spend all this money on it, do you know what it does?
Yep.
And if you're not sure, absolutely leverage the salespeople. Make them actually show you a demo. Ask every single question you can possibly think of, and even then some. Figure out what exactly does it do. Then after you figure out what it does, how expensive is it? Is it something that's a one-time purchase? Is it a subscription
Hmm.
model? Is it a franchise type model? Like how are you paying for this? Do you get a trial period? Can you back out of it? What does that look like? How easy is it to use? And I think that this is one of the biggest kind of hesitancies for a lot of organizations who want to use DEI products is
Sure.
everyone wants to use 5 or 6 different types of products. None of them are easy to use. None of them work well with each other. None of them you can get people up and running fairly easily with. It's
Hmm.
just kind of, hey, this is what we're supposed to get. Um, so how hard is it to use? And if something is difficult to use, people are less likely to use it.
Definitely. We see that all the time. All the time.
Hmm.
Or
Yeah.
there's like this excitement about the tool, the product, and we're all excited and we're like, yeah, we're going to use this. And we start leveraging it, and then it just becomes like this clunky add on. And it's like, we just kind of trickle off and no one uses it. And then we're paying for what?
Yeah, you're paying a lot of money that can be leveraged somewhere else for
Yeah.
a tool that no one's using, and that's just bad business. It's
Hmm.
just bad business. Um, how does the product store sensitive information? You're collecting DEI data, which might include demographic data, that might include very specialized data. Where is this being stored? Who has access to it? What is the security policy behind it?
Hmm.
Incredibly important. Where is that data being held? Where is it going? Um, how are you defining success with this product? You're grabbing it. How do you know that this is actually useful? No, and that aligns along with what is your goal and strategy. How do you know that this is actually working?
Right.
Does the product scale? You have a company of 100 people. Will you still be able to use that same product when you have a company of 1,000 people? Or do you have to use something else? And then if you do, how easy is it to integrate with all the other stuff you have? How easy is all of your products to integrate with each other? Again, going back to ease of use, if you have 5 different things and they all have like different little pieces and they don't
Hmm.
integrate very well, no one's going to use it. It's too much work.
Sure.
Your goal as you're assessing a DEI product, your goal overall is to look to reduce friction as much as possible. Make it easy on yourself and everyone else.
Hmm.
And then finally, what does support look like? Do you have a maintenance and transition plan? Somebody's got to be responsible for keeping up with this. Is it your IT folks? Is it your DEI folks? Is it human resources? Who's going to make sure that this doesn't fall apart? Like, if something breaks, who am I calling?
Right.
So those are a checklist of things that, and yes, we will absolutely drop all of this stuff in afterwards. Um, like that's a checklist of things of what should you be looking for when you're looking for a DEI product. And again, that could be something as simple as we now have a Slack plugin, all the way up to using something like Workday or using Culture Amp, like all of those. It kind of just depends on where you are, but you can
Yep.
use the same checklist for whatever your product is.
That's
Okay.
great. That's super helpful. And I like that you added that support piece on the end as well, which I think just kind of really resonates with me because I'm constantly thinking about the change management piece. And as someone who has been a part of many transitions between products, I'll never forget there was one that was really painful. Like, I have like some trauma around it, but I remember we transitioned from one applicant tracking system to another, and it took months. And just because there were so many small differences between the systems, it wasn't as simple as like, let's just pick up this data and transfer it over to this set. Like, it did not work like that. So, um, these are all valid things to consider. And then also, like I said, that change management piece, like who's actually going to be responsible? Who is here to push this transition plan along? Who is here to support this journey as well? Also important.
Exactly, exactly. And how do you support that person who's supporting it?
Right.
Just like in like in tons of DEI work, A lot of it is considered duties as assigned.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you make sure that that person is getting the support they need in addition to the other work they're doing, or do you also hire someone in to do that work? So
Yeah,
what does that look like? Um,
definitely.
so now let's get into like the fun part. When we talk about DEI products, there are a couple. There are like 7 different categories, y'all. This was the part that I started to get into, and when I sent this to Adriel, I was like, I think I might have gone a little overboard.
Uh,
Um,
it's
yeah,
useful.
I did. I have 5 pages single spaced of notes, y'all. Like
No,
this is
actually.
5 pages single spaced because I was like, let's go. And I
Yes.
also had to kind of like rein myself in. I was like, Caren, don't be this person today. Um, so the first category and the one that I think everybody thinks of when they think of DEI tools is
Mm-hmm.
assessment and analytics. Like that's what everybody thinks is when you think of DEI, here's what you're thinking of.
Right.
There are a number of companies that do this, and they all have proprietary software. So you can absolutely look up DEI assessment and analytics tools. The accuracy and veracity of a lot of those tools may leave some to be desired.
Okay.
But again, if you're going through your checklist and asking these questions, you can determine what is working for you or what's not working for you. Some of the biggest ones on the block are Culture Amp and Vizier. Those are two of like the biggest ones. And the goals of analytics and assessment tools are really to help you provide that data to be able to drive strategic initiatives coming out of that. And again, when we talk about data driven DEI, incredibly important. Um, I am just going to say that it is not the entire story, and there are, it should not be the only thing that you use, and that
Yeah,
quantitative data is just as important as qualitative data. And so
absolutely.
being able to have both is super duper important. So, um, yeah, don't just rely on data. Okay.
Yeah, I feel like so many I understand the need for data, especially for a lot of our clients who are in the tech space. They love data. If there's no data, a lot of times they're not believing you. A lot of times they're not listening to you, which is quite frustrating. And there's, from my experience, always this desire for quantitative data over qualitative data and this prioritization. And I don't know, like you absolutely, to your point, you need both of them, right? And the qualitative data to me has been so much more telling. And just to give a little context here, when we're talking about quantitative data within DEI, we're often thinking about things like that you can put a number to, right? So we're thinking about demographic data. We might be talking about pay equity numbers, how many of this identity are in this particular role, right? But then when we're talking about, and I often say that's the part, that's the D, the diversity. But then there's the qualitative stuff, which for me taps, usually I see taps into the equity and the inclusion pieces. Although quantitative, qualitative both hit equity, but inclusion, I feel like for the most part, you are going to gather a lot of your inclusion information from qualitative data, from asking people questions. And a lot of times we rely on surveys, which can be good, but there's a lot of faults with surveys. You often will capture the majority sentiment with a survey, and you'll often miss a lot of those less represented voices in an organization. And so it's important to be mindful of that. But there's this beauty that comes when you mash up the quantitative and the qualitative so you could paint a much broader picture and get a fuller understanding. So just wanted to provide a little context for anyone that is new to this area and unsure perhaps about what we're talking about.
Exactly. And and when talking about qualitative versus quantitative data, for me, I think of quantitative data as what is happening, and qualitative data is why is it happening or
Mm,
how is it happening.
I love that.
So you need both, and the quantitative data can show you kind of trends and show you interesting points that are kind of picking up. But then you should dig into, okay, well, what does that mean?
Head and
What is the
heart.
story behind it?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
the so what, who cares? If you know or work with me, you'll hear that I say that phrase a lot. I have Dr. Espinoza from the University of Houston, the Clear Lake, to thank for that. Of So what? Who
Shout
cares?
out.
You're like, why? Why are you doing this? Um, so yeah, that's kind of thinking about that. The next biggest category that people think of when they think about DEI products is around the recruiting and hiring space. Um, as another aside, I also feel like I have a lot of these extra little bubbles that pop around. As another aside, I just want to be incredibly clear about the fact that most of your product problems in DEI are not problems of recruiting. Most of your DEI problems are not a problem of a pipeline.
Can we run that back and say it like 20,000 more times?
To be pithy and to lean on my former advertising background, the pipeline is not the problem. It never has been. The pipeline is a symptom. The problem is people don't feel like they belong. And the problem is people don't feel like they see anyone like themselves. So why would I be in a space where I don't see anyone like me, or who cares like me? Now notice that was not a conversation of race, gender, or orientation.
Yeah. Oof,
Do
the
you see any
word.
other parents? Do you see any other people who are neurodiverse? Do you see any other people who are disabled? Do you see any other people of different religious backgrounds? No? Then guess what? Maybe I don't feel like I belong either.
Mm, a
The
word.
pipeline's not the problem.
Word. You know, something else that has been prevalent these days that I've seen in terms of the pipeline problem, and I'm using air quotes for anyone that is just listening, is that people are unable to let go of these, and again, air quotes, requirements, right? You have to have had experience in this specific industry doing this exact job. And that is a problem. No, you don't. If you have experienced sales in one industry and you've been really darn good at it, you could probably bet your bottom that you could go into a different industry and do the same thing, as long as you have the desire and the ability to learn those subtle differences that might exist. What is the problem, right? Or this tie that we have to, this person had to have gone to this specific school, or, they have to have a bachelor's to do insert this thing that does not require a bachelor's degree, right? The pipeline is a symptom, as Caren said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just had to add that.
Yes.
It's been
And
literally grinding my gears lately.
I,
Grinding my gears.
I feel like if there is one thing that I think if there's one thing that will probably send me to the moon every single time, it's engaging with a new client or engaging with a new group of folks, and the initial discussion comes up about recruitment and the pipeline.
Hmm.
Very, 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 very rarely is that an actual problem. Very rarely is it an actual problem. And in fact, you fix a lot of other things, and the pipeline absolutely resolves itself.
Hmm.
But that requires a lot of extra work. And this is, again, a bit of a tangent, but I felt like it was, again, important just to reiterate that as we look at recruiting and hiring products itself.
Yes.
So, as you are looking at products that can help you within that recruiting and hiring process, um, one of my personal favorites is Textio. And Textio is so good at looking at identifying biases in job descriptions
Yep.
and actually making your job descriptions more inclusive. Um, and it takes out things, it takes out weird terms like a guru of something, or the kind of work hard, play hard concept. One thing that I've seen that actually was an output of Textio is I'm starting to see some job descriptions explicitly say, even if you don't hit all of these qualifications, but you think you would be a good fit,
Hmm.
still apply. Because that opens the door to be more inclusive to folks who may not have a bachelor's degree but have the level of experience. People who might feel like, oh, well, because I don't only have maybe. So I think that that's all great, and that was an output of the work that Textio did. So I think that that's really cool to start to see that populate through job descriptions. But things like Textio, things like Seek Out, even software like Greenhouse are really, really good at being able to help you understand and visualize where there might be pain points within that recruiting and hiring process and how you can actually help with those.
Yep.
So those are the two big kind of categories of DEI tools.
Hmm.
The next one, which I would say is probably the B level, if there these two would be A level, would be employee training and performance management,
Okay.
which are two different things, by the way. Employee training is how you make sure your employee is doing the job that you have hired them for.
Mm.
Performance management is how do you get them to accelerate in their job and career.
Right.
Those are two different things.
Yes.
So, for employee development, my personal favorite tool is not an app, is not software. It is a good old website, and it is the Harvard
I
Implicit
knew you were
Bias
gonna
Test.
say that. I knew it. I knew it. I knew it.
I,
I knew
I,
it.
for as much as I absolutely am not a fan
Yeah.
of doing implicit and unconscious bias workshops. That is a long story. We could talk about it some other time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I am enamored to this day with one of the oldest implicit bias tests out there, and it is the one from Project Implicit from Harvard.
Yep.
It is absolutely phenomenal, and it is one that I still take yearly. I take a few of them yearly
Hmm.
just to make sure that I haven't incorporated any biases in my own life and work, even as a DEI professional. So I love it. It's free. It's a website. You literally can just type in Harvard implicit bias test. It'll take you right there. It's fantastic.
I am a
Um,
huge fan too. And just to add, like, what's really cool about that whole Project Implicit project, and it is a series of tests that you can take, right? But it really is. They basically created like this virtual study. So they're collecting data from it, and they've learned a lot about our biases, and it's been ongoing for a very long time. One caveat, as I always remind people, it is a great way to help you identify some of your biases, but it will not help you actually mitigate them. So you actually have to do some work once you identify those biases, whatever they might be, in addition to that, taking these tests. So a lot of times people are like, oh, I went and I took an IAT test. I know what my biases are. I'm like, great. So now what are you going to do about it? What's next? And what? Who cares? As you said.
so what? Who cares? So what? Who
So
cares?
what? Who cares? Right? What else? And what else? Yes.
Exactly. So it's like, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do?
Yes.
So that yeah, that's a really good one. I also really like equity indicators. That's also really good on, and that one also kind of taps into a little bit of assessment tools also, but it
Hmm.
also kind of does a bit of a deeper dive within employee development itself. So I really like equity indicators also.
Yep.
So that's kind of employee development and training. And there are tons of organizations that have proprietary employee development and training. Hell, we have DEI in a box,
Yes.
which would also fit within tools for employee development and training. Um, so if you're interested in DEI in a box, let us know.
Yes.
I swear, also always an ad girl. Not my fault. Not my fault. Um, so now that we've had kind of employee development and training, now let's start looking at performance management. How do you get someone to start pushing themselves up and going to that next level? Here you're going to start to see things as you're looking for tools. Some of the keywords that you're going to look for, which is a term that weirds me out, but it's what it is, and
Yeah.
that's human capital management.
Mm.
That phrase really icks me out. Um, I personally have a hard time thinking about people as capital. Um, but that's the term, that's what's going to help you find what you're trying to look for. One of the biggest ones is Workday.
Hmm. Yep.
You can
Yep.
use Workday for a lot of things. It's also shockingly good for pulling out demographics, tracking progress to progression for like your growth management plans. Like it's really good for all of those things also.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and a lot of people actually have Workday, so it's actually something that you could deeply integrate for DEI work itself. So I
Yeah.
think that that's a really great thing to kind of move up and use.
A lot of
Um,
people are not using Workday to its full capabilities. Might I add, right? Like I will say I've been thoroughly impressed by Workday's progress. Like I've used it over many years now. They've been around for some time, so they've had time to figure out how to create a product that works and taps into a lot of different areas. And so yeah, I if you're not fully, or if you're not using your Workday to its full potential, definitely reach out to them. And this is not we're not getting paid for this. Although, I mean, Workday, if you want, just like,
Why are we like
but
this?
we're just huge fans. We're fangirling over here over Workday.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Workday. And also kind of going back into the checklist,
Hmm.
if you already have Workday, that's one less thing to integrate. You already have it. People are already using it. So it's just something you can expand and scale upon. So that's a really great example of using something you already have and then leveraging DEI tools within that part. So
Yep.
that's a good way of kind of expanding the work that you already have.
Yep.
Um,
Can I just add a really quick?
oh yeah.
I know there's a little bit of lag between us talking and the live stream, and there are a few comments that came in. One of them, yeah, one of them was around. Linda was asking about focus groups. Should we say that focus groups are great tools to support inclusion in terms of data collection? And I replied back here and I said, yes, I'm a huge fan of focus groups as well as one on one conversations. I'm actually doing a ton of one on ones this week. But it's a great way to gather qualitative information and to pull out those less represented voices within an environment. A couple of things there. I think it helps to go in and have kind of like a set of questions that you're going to ask people so that you can fairly kind of gauge different experiences. Also, make sure you ask an open ended, like, is there anything else kind of question to let people share. And then the second thing I'll add is making it anonymized, right? And I let people know multiple times, like, whatever you share with me, as you know, and I think this is the benefit of us being consultants, we are third parties. So you're sharing this with me anonymously. You don't have to worry in terms of psychological safety. I'm setting the tone. And so I tell people, be as candid, as open as possible. Know that this is completely anonymized. I make sure that I clean up the data before I share it back with whoever my client is, whether that's leadership, HR, etc. Obviously, there are exceptions, and I tell people that too. Like, if you tell me something that's illegal, I have to tell people, and I have to tell, I have to report back who said what. So that's taken care of. Or if it's something that violates one of your company policies or something, or that's discriminatory in any way, then yes, I have to share that. But beyond that, letting people know that, I mean, the stuff people tell me, I'm like, wow, you are really comfortable here, and I appreciate it. But it is so insightful, and to compare that qualitative data to what you get out of a survey, in which cases most people when they see a survey are like, yes, no, I don't know. They don't really say much. You get so much more data. So I just wanted to respond to that. Um, and then Linda also added, when the environment is inclusive, diverse talent will want you and your company. You have to make the environment good enough for people to want to come in, not bring people into spaces that haven't been intentionally created to be safe and expect people to be included. That'll cause more harm, and we wouldn't want that. Absolutely. Yep. So just wanted to make
Five,
sure we covered that
five.
because I know there is that lag. So thank you, Linda, for that
Thank you.
additional input.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of tacking on to what you said, Adriel, about like focus groups.
And
I love a good focus group.
yeah,
My sometimes my only concern about a focus group is making sure the mix of the focus group is a good mix because you don't want
yes,
someone to overtalk the rest of the group.
hmm,
And you as a facilitator should be mindful of that and be able to kind of pick up the vibe and kind of the this pacing of the group itself.
yeah,
Um, and also, one thing I love to say as a consultant is because I am a consultant, I get to play the bad guy.
hmm,
So there are things that you don't feel comfortable telling people that I absolutely can say because, again, I'm a consultant.
right,
So if you want to share those things with me, that's fine. I can have them come out of my mouth and it's anonymized. Um,
exactly,
the other thing I get a lot, especially because I work with a lot of smaller organizations, is well, there's only 50 of us. And if I tell you this piece of information, they're going to know it's me.
right,
And it's like, well, I could do one of two things. I can say an employee at this company said this, so it kind of anonymizes it that way. Or I can abstract the information into, so this is a theme that I saw,
yep,
or I heard this come through.
hmm,
And I can kind of anonymize the information, abstract it a little bit this way so it doesn't sound like, so Caren told
right,
me.
yeah, yeah. And just a couple thoughts on what you're saying because those definitely aligned with you on that. In terms of like the group makeup, I always like to work with the client to figure out what those groups are going to look like. And so being mindful that you don't have a manager and their direct report in the same group, right? You got to be careful about that. Or just being mindful of the level of experience that people have or tenure within a focus group can matter as well. Like lumping all the LGBTQIA plus identifying folks together, depending on the size, not going to work in most instances, right? So you have to be very thoughtful about the makeup. And then in terms of you were kind of touching on this earlier in terms of data protection, even like sending calendar invites, make that thing private. If there's a sign up process, make sure that people's data is protected, especially if it's a smaller organization where maybe they have open calendars and people can like hop in and look and see who's Caren talking to today. All of those things you need to be thinking about, especially in smaller organizations. So just wanted to put that out there
Yeah,
as well.
I'm a big fan of using things like Calendly, which is also again look another tool, and using that to schedule focus groups and meetings outside of that completely, so no one has access to my calendar, and then just telling folks, hey, on your calendar, just put busy
Yep.
or meeting,
Yep.
just
Exactly.
so no one needs to be in your business like that.
Exactly.
Um, Y'all, we are dropping gems on gems
I
today, and I'm
mean,
very excited for this. Um, so I would say that those are kind of your bigger kind of categories. There are some more categories here, and that are things like workplace culture. There are absolutely tools that can help with culture. Some of my favorites are websites that kind of talk about what culture kind of means.
mm-hmm.
Um, Even sites like Medium are really great.
Yeah.
Things like LinkedIn is actually a great tool to use to get information about what other people are doing in the industry, what your
Mm-hmm.
fellow colleagues are doing, what your fellow organizations are doing. That is a great tool to use to see what other people are doing.
Absolutely.
I also really like the Muse, which is another website which is really great. Their advice section is actually really good. Inclusively is a great company that has a lot of really great information. Also, Everyday Ally is really good, especially if you are someone who is looking to see how you can develop and support your allyship. I think that's actually a really cool site to do that.
Yeah.
Um, so then getting into some of the accessibility tools. And this was one that I actually need to go back and pull some of the older tools that I used. But two that I really like is Site Improve and then JAWS, which is Job Access with Speech. Um, those are two fantastic tools. And also, um, use your native tools on your systems. I know that both PCs and Macs have accessibility tools that
Mm-hmm.
can be turned on,
Yep.
so use them. And even basic things like the W3C school talks about accessibility as like building websites. Um, there's a ton of really great like UX tools to use when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to accessibility and like um, contrast, like high and low contrast, screen readers, all sorts of stuff. Hey, go talk to your design and UX people.
Yeah.
Trust me, they have information.
Definitely, definitely. I would also, something that I recently started thinking about in terms of accessibility tools, and this really came from um, my recent conversation with Dr. Sam Ray. And if you haven't checked out the video on my DEI in 5 series, please go watch it. I just posted it yesterday. But Dr. Sam Ray is a DEI professional. She also really focuses on system analytics. Um, and also, she is the founder of the DEI Offload, which is a community for DEI professionals to come together and, share ideas, brainstorm, air our grievances if you need to. All of that aside, though, our conversation was about neurodiversity. Dr. Sam was diagnosed as an adult with autism. And so we talked about her experience and mental health, entrepreneurship. Great conversation. I say all that to say that now I am starting to think about how neurodiversity fits into accessibility tools as well, right? So having things like project management tools like Trello or Asana, or time management tools where you can focus, right? There are those screen focus tools like FocusMate or even Toggle where you can track your time and be like, all right, I've used 10 minutes here. There are also mental health tools as well, like BetterHelp and Talkspace. So also think about those as well. As someone who has ADHD, I've had to leverage tools to keep myself organized, to keep myself focused. And it's hard, like even with the tools, but I will say it is exponentially easier to have these tools now, where I can track these things. So don't make sure you have a broad kind of perspective when it comes to accessibility. Accessibility can be visual accessibility or audio accessibility, but it can also include things like neurodiversity as well.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for bringing that up. Yeah, as someone who has also been diagnosed with ADD inattentive, um, yeah, I use momentum all the time. And I use momentum and I also use the Pomodoro method.
Wait, what's
Uh,
momentum?
oh,
Put me
momentum,
on, put me on.
it's like a screen, it's like a screen, say like screen focus.
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Gotta check that one
And
out.
it's been incredibly helpful because it literally takes over your entire screen. And then I do it as Pomodoro, so I do 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off, and
Got
that's a
you.
good way of me kind of like cycling through my day. Um, so yeah, it's again, tools don't have to be software.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
don't. They don't have to be software. It's just things that could kind of just help you along with your product, help
Mm-hmm.
you along with your day.
Definitely.
Um, There are also community engagement platforms, and community engagement platforms can be anything from Slack to Teams to um, any of those fantastic little chat things. You're like, but that's a really fast and interesting way to get synchronous information. It's also a really great way to broadcast stuff if you need to.
Sure.
Um, so yeah, so those are also super cool. But also kind of going back to accessibility, just realize that not everybody really likes synchronous tools like that, and not
Yeah.
everybody works well with those kinds of pings. Like for example, for me, I do not actually work well with chat functions. I get wildly distracted.
Mm,
So being able to have a way of kind of asynchronously look at that. So what I do is I'll have Slack kind of drop like a digest of like, hey, here's what's been going on, just so you can check in. I also
sure.
schedule very specific times to go in, look at stuff, and then leave. Um, but for some folks, having a ping or synchronous communication is fantastic. So,
Mm-hmm.
again, it's something to have as an option.
Yep.
Um, Finally, policy compliance. Now, we've kind of moved a little bit past just the basic EEOC compliance, but if you are in an industry where that is something you actually need, maybe you're working for a state or local government or you're in federal government, you may need to actually look at EEOC stuff. So I would definitely um, look for, again, EEOC.gov. Also, the Office of Personnel Management is actually super helpful for that. Great group of folks, super helpful information. For software itself, there's Comply Right, which is also super good for that too. Um,
Nice.
so those are like the big categories. I think there was like 7 different
Yeah.
categories
Wait, did we
of
hit on
tools.
gosh, what was it? Community engage?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We talked.
Oh,
Well,
right,
that's
right.
where I talked about things like Slack. I mean, we have Mentor
Got
Loop
you.
also, which is
Yes.
another
Yes.
platform.
Yeah.
But yeah, but pretty much all of your chat platforms, all of
Yeah.
your chat bots, your micro learning, all of those little things of building community
Yeah.
itself. Forums also really good for that. Discord is good for that.
Yeah.
All of those ways of building community.
I there was one that a client told me about recently that they're using. I can't think of the name of it. It's something about coffee, but basically it's like a Slack plugin, and it creates virtual like coffee meetings, so that you
Oh
get like
yeah.
10 to 15 minutes with like different team members, and you
Oh
can,
gosh.
obviously not everyone is going to want to do that, but for people that do want some additional engagement, especially for remote teams, that's one thing I've been hearing from a lot of my clients now. They are just feeling this isolation and this loneliness with working remotely, and so they're, especially for newer employees, they're coming in to these spaces where people who were previously in an office together already had some sort of connection built. And so having an additional way to get to know people, or even, and it doesn't have to be personal, it could just be like, what do you do here, what does your work entail, that can go a long way. So
Actually, I used it when I was at Pivotal.
oh,
It's
nice.
called Donut.
Donut, yes, thank you, thank you. I was like coffee, right, but
Yeah,
coffee and donuts, right.
because like as soon as you started talking about it, I was like, this is very familiar.
Yes,
It's called
yes.
Donut, and the way that
Yep.
it works is that everybody who signs up for Donut, it'll like randomize the connection, and it'll say, hey, I've now paired you with this person. Do
Yep.
you want to go have coffee, or do you want to go have a donut?
Hmm.
And it was really really cool for me, and actually I used it when I was still on site. but it was a really great way of talking with folks on other teams who I didn't normally work with, talking with other folks. Like, it was a great way to talk with engineers outside of
Right.
the work environment,
Yep.
and to help them realize that product people aren't terrible. But it donut was actually a really really cool thing to do. So yeah,
Yeah.
and it is, it's cool.
Absolutely. Linda added to the chat, I don't know where this tool falls, but a good tool that has been helpful to me is being in communities that are different from what I'm familiar with or communities that I want to learn more about. I do this through Reddit or Twitter, and I like how Reddit has these different communities where I can just be an observer and learn about what they're needing and saying. For accessibility, I do hashtag accessibility, and it helps me know what people are having issues with and gets me thinking on how it can be resolved. That has been very helpful to me. Similarly, I have been a Redditor since I think college.
Yeah.
I love Reddit. Same with Twitter. And also I will add on TikTok to that as well. TikTok has exposed me to so many different people. Like doing all these amazing things. Like yesterday, I came across this younger black woman who is a pilot. And I mean, my girl was like, whole face was beat, hair was done, and she's just flying a plane casually, talking over the intercom, saying all the stuff that I have no idea what she's saying. But just like in my everyday life, I don't think I would have encountered someone like that and been able to get that insight. And so it's just incredible to come across not only individuals, but to Linda's point, just have this exposure to communities. And I think, one thing, and I've said this before, I wish more DEI practitioners did was continue to expose themselves. Like, that is one thing that people are always like, teach me how to do what you do. And I'm like, I literally have always been like this in my life. I've always wanted to be around different types of people. I've always struggled to find my group because I just always want to be around all sorts of people. Um, and I think that's one of the things that like you have to continue doing in this work, in addition to knowing like the theoretical stuff and the systems and the processes and the tools. It's so necessary. So just wanted to add that as well.
Yeah, as kids sometimes you get chastised for being nosy, but it makes you a really really great DEI professional.
Yeah,
Be so nosy,
yeah,
and be so curious about the world around you, and be so curious about other folks who aren't like you. I've
absolutely.
been reading a lot about the crisis of men and the concept of men in loneliness. And I have had to work through my own biases of feeling like, well, that sounds like a you problem.
Hmm.
But to work through my own biases of that, and like, what does that actually mean, and how does that show up in the work that I do with clients? You got to be nosy, and you got to be curious, and you got to figure out how does that integrate, or does it integrate into the other parts of your life, and what you're trying to look for. So
Yeah,
be nosy. Be
yeah,
nosy.
yeah, definitely. Linda added on learning how to create inclusive workplaces through HR by looking at hashtag anti-work community. In this community, people say all that they hate about work, and that provides insight to what can be improved. Yes, absolutely, right. Especially, I like the anti-work community. I also like um, being exposed, and this is, I think, something that a lot of older people have kind of shied away from, but being exposed to the younger generation of workers. Like right now, we have, I think we're saying like four generations in the workplace. And a lot of the newer generation, they're coming in and they're like, I'm setting boundaries from jump. What I'm like, I wish I did this in my 20s. I'm like, y'all are onto something. I was afraid. I didn't know I could do this. And so
Mm-hmm.
there's so much to be learned. And I think, we're seeing such a shift in the way that we're working now and the way that we're approaching work. And so, yes, I agree. There's so much to be learned from anti work, from different generations, from different styles of work too, right? Some people are fully in office still, some are remote, some are hybrid. There's a lot to be learned across the board. So the more we remain open to all of this, including all the tools that Caren just put us onto, I think the better, long term for sure.
Absolutely. So we have just about 10 minutes left. Can you tell that I'm not going to take the time to
Come
give her my
on,
head?
facilitator.
Um, I want to talk about AI. Everybody, their grandma and their sister is talking about AI. And I first want to start again as a product person.
Hmm.
Um, We've been using AI for years. It's not new. Every time you've used an Amazon, hey, if you liked, then you might like. Every time you've had a recommendation of, hey, you might also know. Every time you've had something populated, all that is machine learning, learning what you do and what you like. All of that is artificial intelligence. We're just getting better at it. So first of all, stop freaking out about AI.
It's been
Stop it.
around. It's been around.
Stop it. It's been around. Secondly, when it comes to artificial intelligence and large language learning models, things like ChatGPT and Bard, um, inputs determine outputs. And what you are finding, and Adriel, I think you had a really good post about this with Canva,
Mm-hmm.
is that whoever is creating the inputs will determine what the outputs look like. So it is especially important if you are within the DEI community or you are a member of a marginalized community to help create inputs.
Yeah,
Because, if only a very selective group of people are doing things, that's what they're thinking about, that's what's going to come out.
absolutely.
Um, there is a different conversation that can be had about AI taking over the work of other folks. That is a very different conversation and one that I am not going to have here.
Mm-hmm.
I have got some strong feelings about it, but that's not a conversation I'm going to have here.
Mm-hmm.
All I'm going to say is that inputs define outputs. Um, I will also say that a really fantastic book that I would recommend for everybody is Race After Technology by Ruha Benjamin. That is a fantastic book that talks about the effects of AI and large language learning models. And that book is a few years old, so it predates this current kind of wave.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, all of that as a preface to say AI can actually be super duper helpful when it comes to using it as a tool.
Yeah,
But I will say that it is a tool, it does not replace. And I
absolutely.
think that a good example of seeing how replacing goes wrong is that example that you found, Adriel, with that the AI avatar
Mm-hmm.
that was doing that work, and I don't know if you want to speak to it a little bit before I get on my high horse. You may want to kind of let folks know
Yeah,
what
I'll give
exactly
some
that is. So.
context. I mean, laugh now, cry later. That's my theory. That's been my motto this year. So yeah, I was watching this. It was actually a LinkedIn live, and they were doing a live demo. I posted about this. I'll dig and reshare the post. But there's a company, and it's not exclusive to them. Um, there are a few companies out there doing this. This company in particular is called Translator Inc. There's another one called Synthesia IO that has been around since 2017. To Karen's point, AI is not new. Textio AI tool. It's been around since I started professionally working in DEI. So none of these things are new. But they did this demo with Translator, and basically they've designed this tool that provides a co-facilitator for DEI workshops or trainings, as they like to call them. And in this instance, in the demo, the AI generated facilitator, co-facilitator, was a Black woman, and it just got me thinking about and reflecting on my own experiences where I have been told in so many words like that I am not palatable for a particular audience. Typically, if you know me, I work a lot with leaders, executive leaders who are often older white men. And I've been told, like, I think we need someone else. Or I've been asked to co facilitate with someone who is more palatable. I cannot speak today. Um, and so, knowing that there are companies creating these AI generated facilitators, who are, yes, real people. Basically, they have real actors and models come in, stand in front of the green screen. They capture them saying different things from different angles. But nonetheless, it is a person an AI that you can go in and select. You can choose your avatar essentially and have it facilitate a discussion. And that begs the question of ethics for me because I'm like, so then that means you can replace me and have this more palatable AI, even if it is a co facilitator. Um, and that That's scary to me. I mean, and there are other examples of this. Levi's was in talks with a company to start using AI generated models to diversify the models on their website. Again, why not just hire actual models, a diverse mix of models? But, money, cost. So that's just a little context there. I, of course, have my feels. There are plenty of posts on my LinkedIn and my YouTube about how I really feel, but we've got 4 minutes left.
Yeah. So, that may be another conversation for us. But
Yeah, maybe next
I
week.
just just know that AI is a tool, not a replacement.
Hmm.
And some of those things that can be helpful as a tool is that you absolutely can create a smaller subset of a language learning model. So it doesn't have to be a large one, it could be small.
Yeah.
And because it's small, you can train it more succinctly and you can actually do a better job training it. Again, it's small. Um, it actually could be super efficient and it could be really great being predictive and it could be really great showing you patterns that you may not see yourself. So AI could be really, really great for helping you do that. It also could be really great for helping you abstract an actual assessment or analysis itself. Again, Textio is a fantastic example of that. You might have internalized certain words and phrases that you're like, well, that's not a problem. And Textio is like, but it is.
Right. Yeah.
And that actually can help you quite a bit. Again, a lot of the challenges we talked about, those, a lot of the challenges are bias. Bias is a huge, huge challenge in AI. And I'm hoping that the more we talk about biases being a problem, the more we can get folks who are uh, from different groups to help to contribute to these models so that it really does reflect our actual society.
Hmm.
Um, the other big challenge for AI right now is not everybody actually knows how to use it. And so, if you are an organization that doesn't have a strong engineering or data team, it's really hard to kind of roll your own. Um, so, you may have to reach out to another organization to help you build that. And then issues of security and intellectual property come in, and so that becomes a bit of a challenge. Or if you leverage any of the larger models, things like ChatGPT and Bard, just know that you don't exactly own all of that stuff, and what are the liabilities of that also. And so it's things that you have to kind of look at, and then also,
Right.
just because you got it back from a learning model doesn't mean it's actually accurate.
That's fair.
So
Yeah.
again, use it as a tool, not a
As a tool,
replacement.
definitely. Yeah, I think, and I definitely want us to have a conversation too about. I've been seeing a lot of conversations, especially on LinkedIn, where people are like, well, AI isn't a person, it's been trained by people who have biases. Yes, and right, we need to recognize both of those things. The people that have trained these models have biases, but AI exists now and it is a system and process. And so we also have to recognize, as with everything else, that it's both the individual and the systems and the processes that we need to be concerned about. So maybe that'll be our next conversation. We do a little bit of a deep dive on AI. We'll probably need a couple of conversations for that one, but
Yes, yes, I
um,
have thoughts and feelings about all of those. I know, shocking to everyone. Um, but
shocker.
all said and done, I just kind of want to wrap up by saying that um, when talking about DEI tools, it's not just software
Yeah.
and it's not just an app. Tools can be anything that help you make your work easier and faster.
Yeah.
And when looking for a tool, some of the biggest things you need to look for are why are you doing this? What are you trying to get out of it? How do you keep it up and running? Um, yeah, and there's a lot of stuff out there to use, and so I wanted to again talk about some of the things that are available, why they're out there, what you can do with them, and if you are interested in talking about DEI in the product life cycle, that is a whole different conversation, and I am always excited to help you have that conversation with your organization. As someone who has lived on both sides of that table, there's nothing I love more than talking about how you can make your product a little bit more broad. Actually, that's one of the
Love
reasons
it.
why I moved from product to DEI is I felt there were challenges in the cycle, so wanted to help out with it.
Awesome. Well, I learned a lot from this discussion. I know that, and hopefully this was helpful for those that are on live with us, both on LinkedIn and YouTube. Thank you as always for joining us. I know that Caren has I think we shared in the beginning, she sent me a 5 page single line document. And I was like, what? We're
And I,
talking about all of this in an hour, and we actually got through a lot that was on here. But I think this in a lovely guide would be awesome. So
yeah,
maybe we can follow up with a guide that has a lot of these tools linked into it. LinkedIn, no pun
yeah.
intended, so that y'all can access it and use it for reference. But thank you all again for joining us. TBD on our next topic, but it might be AI.
Maybe.
Why not? So yeah, we'll keep doing these on Thursday. So be sure to look for the next event announcement, and we will see you back here soon. Thanks again, y'all. All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye.